Dear Reddit, what is your all-time most embarrassing moment? I'm 41, never done it, but I found my BF crying in the bathroom, and when I asked why, he said I pumped and I sicked and I pooped. Didn't make much sense to me at first, but what happened was he farted, and it smelled so bad he puked, and he puked so hard he shat himself. I was crying too, but from laughing too much. That was about 12 years ago, and it still cracks us up. He wasn't sober at the time. Dear Reddit, what is your all-time most embarrassing moment? When I was in primary school, there was a very awkward girl in my class. We were all sat in a circle reading a book, taking it one sentence at a time until the kid next to her said, "Susanna's PO'd," and everyone started screaming and got up. She started crying, and the teacher helped her up. She had taken a giant dump that was on the floor because she was wearing a skirt. She didn't want to put her hand up and ask to go to the loo because everyone was reading. Until the final day of high school, she never let it down, and everyone knew her as the girl who had an unfortunate incident, and she became a bit of a recluse afterwards. What's the most shameful thing you've done recently? I was pretty drunk, and I went to relieve my bladder in the alley next to the apartment I was drinking in. Next door, there were some basement-level apartments with windows near the ceiling, which were about 6 inches above the ground and a couple of feet high. Needless to say, I was drunk enough to think, it'd be funny if I peed on this window. I found out it was open when the light went on inside. What is the funniest, real-life story you can tell? I had a friend whose roommate had a large German Shepherd dog. One day, when she returned from work, she found him playing with the neighbor's son's pet rabbit, deceased. She panicked and gave the rabbit a bath, dried it, and put it back in its cage, afraid to tell the neighbors that her dog had killed it. Some hours later, they heard the neighbor's son screaming hysterically. It turns out the rabbit had died, and they had buried it, and her dog had unearthed it to play with it. Hey Reddit, what is your best karma is a bitch story? I dated a girl my freshman year of high school. It didn't work out, but all was well. Fast forward to senior year, the same girl tries to call me over for a good time? Well, I declined. I learned early on not to stick my big boy in baffling. Come to find out that she had been calling every guy she knew to come have relations with her because she was pregnant and wanted someone more responsible than the guy who knocked her up to take responsible for the baby. It didn't work, but she ended up having triplets, and it fucking destroyed her body. What is the worst thing an ex did to you? I need to share my feelings about my wife's betrayal. After discovering her affair, I had a better first day than expected, but today, I'm struggling with only 3 hours of sleep and difficulty eating. I feel hurt and disgusted. I trusted my wife completely, but she cheated on me for 3 years, and I accidentally found out when I saw evidence on her phone. While I'm tempted to say more hurtful things, I know I need to control my emotions. Reconciliation is not an option, and I'm concerned about the emotional toll this will take. What should I do? Redditors who suddenly came into a lot of money, what was your horror story of people begging for money? I once took second place in a poker tournament and won $150,000. There was an audience of about 200 people when it finished. Common practice was people ask winners for a lucky chip. I was almost mobbed by people begging for lucky chips as I left the casino. I had to be escorted by security and paid a friend $300 to follow me in their car. We drove all over town for 2 hours to make sure nobody was following me home. What's your totally true story that nobody believes? Back when I was in school, I saved this douchebag's life. We were more classmates than friends. A van had lost its brakes and was coming toward us at, let's say, 60 kilometers per hour. The asshole didn't even honk the horn or anything. By chance, I turned around and saw the van coming towards us. I pushed the said douchebag out of the way and got hit in the arm with the side. Reddit, what are your favorite camping stories? I was camping with my son when he was about 16, he never really liked it much. Camping nearby was a lovely Asian family with 3 teenage daughters with whom my son got friendly. I woke up on the third morning and noticed my wallet was not in the same place I had left it. Upon examination, the only thing I found missing was a condom. I never said anything about it, and my son all of a sudden loves camping. Anyone have a funny story about how they damaged their iPhone? When I was 16, I shattered my iPhone screen. Knowing Apple's repair policy well, I decided to have some fun. My friends and I ran it over, smashed it, and later brought it in 3 pieces to Apple. They had to replace it since it was beyond repair. Soon after, Apple introduced a beyond economical repair status for such cases, which I like to humorously think I influenced. What is the most interesting history/war story you've ever heard? My great-grandfather was part of the Dutch resistance in our hometown Noonan. He would secretly go to the church in the center of town when they knew Allied bomber would pass over. He would be up in the highest point of the church and look out of small shutters to spot the positions of shot-down planes. They saved around 20 Allied airmen. He is buried in the cemetery behind the same church, and you can see the shutters from his grave. What are your crazy ex-girlfriend/boyfriend stories? When I broke up with my ex, he became so hysterical that the only way he would let me leave him was if, after the breakup, we continued to be best friends. Not just any kind of best friend either, he wanted me to still come over for sleepovers and share his bed with him. He told me that any other guy I dated after him had to be 100% okay with this, or else I couldn't date him. What is the most terrifying choking experience you have ever had? I was eating pizza at work. I got up to get a soda from the vending machine, which is in an isolated back hallway. I started to sneeze and inhaled a chunk of pizza crust straight into my windpipe. I knew in that first second it was bad, different than any other time I had choked. My air was cut off entirely, and any attempt at breathing just sort of sucked it a little tighter in there. I'm honestly not entirely sure what happened. I vaguely remember stumbling into the bathroom, but I blacked out. I came to a few seconds or minutes later on the floor of the bathroom and found the hunk of pizza crust in the sink. Any funny/happy stories about the dentist? I don't know if you would find THS funny, but it did happen to me once during my trip to the dentist years ago as a child. I don't know what on earth did the dentist put on me, but I ended up biting his hand until it was covered with blood seeping through his latex glove. My mom had to continue apologizing on the way back home. What is the best riddle you know? The last one no one discovered in more than 1,000 years. Walk on the living, they don't even mumble. Walk on the dead, they mutter and grumble. What are they? The man who invented it doesn't want it for himself. The man who buys it doesn't buy it for himself. The man who needs it doesn't know he needs it. What is it? The last man on earth sits alone in a room. The telephone rings, who is it? If you know the answer, comment below. What is the best riddle you know? The last one no one discovered in more than 1,000 years. Walk on the living, they don't even mumble. Walk on the dead, they mutter and grumble. What are they? The man who invented it doesn't want it for himself. The man who buys it doesn't buy it for himself. The man who needs it doesn't know he needs it. What is it? The last man on earth sits alone in a room. The telephone rings, who is it? If you know the answer, comment below. What are your best or worst birthday stories? My 8th birthday. Now I am a triplet, and so we had about 45 people invited. We each got to invite 15 of our friends, and that morning my brother decides to trip me in the kitchen for the fun of it. Well, I slam my head on the linoleum floor and end up with a minor concussion. Needless to say, I didn't really get to have fun at the party and slept through most of the day. What's your craziest/funniest travel story? I was in Amsterdam, coming down off of some truffles and weed that I had shared with a hostel roommate I met after accidentally slamming the bathroom door into him. I had to catch a 6 a.m. flight to Rome and was still quite out of it. The security guy asked me a simple question, Dutch or English, so he could inquire about my electronics and such. And, of course, I responded with, "No, American." Pet owners of Reddit, what's the funniest story you have about your pet? When my cat thinks I'm not paying attention to her, like when I'm in another room, taking a shower, eating, or on the phone, she'll grab a toy in her mouth and walk around, crying with it until I, or another lesser human substitute, acknowledges her efforts. She'll leave them outside the shower, on my pillow, at the front door, and in various other unexpected places. This behavior has always been really cute and sweet, but last month, she brought me an actual mouse in the middle of the night. People of Reddit, what are your funniest driving stories? I took one of my coworkers to the DMV so he could take his driver's test. He failed before he even left the parking lot. He turned his wheel all the way to the left when he was pulling out of the spot and almost hit the car next to him. The instructor decided to let him take the rest of the test, even though he had already failed. He would have failed twice more. He was going up to a stoplight, and his light was green, but he was turning right. He stopped on a green light to turn right. The other time, he was at a stop sign, and had been stopped long enough to have the person behind him honk.